The tranquil beach day at Gateway City transforms into chaos without warning. An enormous inverted pyramid materializes above the ocean waters, its alien presence casting shadows across the sandy shore. Startled beachgoers freeze in disbelief, staring upward at this impossible sight floating motionlessly in the sky. News helicopters swarm the area, their cameras capturing every angle of the mysterious phenomenon. Terror erupts as harsh screeching sounds pierce the air. Crimson-scaled creatures with membranous wings emerge from the structure's dark openings. These winged reptilian beasts dive toward the city below, sending civilians fleeing in all directions. Glass explodes from building windows as panic spreads like wildfire through the streets. A citizen stumbles and falls, desperately shielding themselves as the aerial predators circle overhead. Lightning suddenly tears across the crimson sky, causing the creatures to scatter in fear. A mysterious figure riding a skeletal winged horse plunges through the storm. The mounted warrior unsheathes an enormous blade, cutting down the monsters with precise strikes. Dismounting with graceful power, she lands in a commanding stance while defeated creatures collapse around her. After removing her battle helmet, she marks her face with the fallen beast's blood. Ancient words of power flow from her lips, sending mystical energy crackling outward. The remaining monsters freeze mid-flight before crashing to the earth. Throughout this display of power, satisfaction gleams in her eyes. Deep within the cursed realm of hell, the sorceress Sussy labors endlessly in eternal darkness. Today brings an unexpected change as warm sunlight touches her shoulders. She rises and turns, squinting against the unfamiliar brightness. "Never thought I'd be happy to see the sun," she murmurs wearily. Apollo, the radiant sun god, descends toward her forbidden island. His divine presence illuminates the barren landscape. "Come forward, witch. You may kneel," he commands with godly arrogance. Sussy squints against his blazing aura and responds defiantly. "I'm fine," she declares, refusing to bow. The god extends a wrapped bundle toward her. Sussy accepts it with growing amazement, discovering an infant girl nestled within. "This is a baby. For what reason have you brought a baby to hell?" she questions with bewilderment. Apollo begins his departure, his solar radiance painting the sky. The baby is Diana, Princess of Visera. She is the last of the Amazons and has been taken from them by my father Zeus as punishment for their crimes against the gods. She may never again see her people. They have all been imprisoned." The god pauses mid-ascent, his expression turning cruel. "From here forth, the word Amazon is banned. So, I decree." Divine fire blazes within his words. "Try for me, Circe. Try to say the word. I want to see," he requests with cold amusement. Circe gazes down at the infant and attempts to speak the forbidden term, but no sound emerges. The word has been erased from existence itself. Pleased with this demonstration, Apollo continues skyward, abandoning the witch with her new burden. "This is hell. What if it dies?" Circe calls desperately. The god's voice echoes without compassion. "The gods care not. This is where she belongs now for however long she is." His presence fades, returning the island to perpetual twilight. Sussy places the child upon the rocky ground with a heavy sigh. Baby Diana coos softly, while the witch observes her. A luminescent serpent slithers toward the helpless infant. Circe remains motionless, expecting hell's dangers to claim the child quickly. The snake bares its fangs and prepares to strike. But Diana moves with supernatural speed, grasping the serpent's jaws and laughing as she tosses it aside like a plaything. Sussy watches in stunned silence before allowing herself to smile. Their shared existence in hell begins this way. Initially, Sussy provides only basic care without emotional attachment. As seasons pass, however, the powerful witch finds herself nurturing Diana, sharing her knowledge of magic and developing genuine maternal love. Together, they forge a humble existence on their cursed island. Years flow by as both Diana and Circe mature, building toward an inevitable destiny. Diana pivots away from the hovering pyramid, surveying the beach strewn with motionless demon lizards. She approaches a stunned National Guard soldier with purposeful strides. "Are you in charge here, soldier?" she inquires with natural authority. The young man gapes speechlessly at this otherworldly warrior. "You should evacuate all civilians within a mile," she instructs, gesturing toward the defeated creatures. They are but harbingers for what is to come. The pyramid begins trembling violently, its base splitting open like petals. "We are out of time," Diana states urgently. "Evacuate your civilians and bring your army." The structure unfolds completely, releasing a colossal demonic entity that crashes into the ocean depths. This monstrous being wades toward the city, but Diana positions herself directly in its path with weapon drawn. "You are not welcome, Harbinger Prime. This world will defend itself. I stand before you with the mythical Athena blade, forged by Hephaestus himself. It is more than capable of sending you to your maker. This world is protected," she proclaims without fear. The massive creature studies her briefly before speaking. Its voice rumbles like distant thunder, the sheer force pushing Diana several steps backward. Her skeletal Pegasus swoops down from above, exhaling flames across the monster's hide. As the beast swipes at her flying mount, Diana seizes the opportunity to strike with her blade. The creature whirls back toward her, unleashing energy beams from its eyes that send her crashing to her knees. "Damn laser eyes." Every time, she mutters through gritted teeth, forcing herself upright. The beast roars a command, awakening the smaller demons from their magical slumber. They swarm Diana in coordinated attack patterns, their claws and beaks tearing at her flesh. "Again you stand? We warned you." The creature hisses before firing another devastating blast that sends her rolling across the sand. In recent memory, Diana had been seated beside Circe within their cave dwelling on Hell's Island. Both women rested in weathered chairs before their crackling fire. Breaking the comfortable silence, Diana speaks with hesitation. "Mother, I want to ask you about this word," she says while indicating her open book. Circe nods with knowing warmth. "I thought you might. It's important, I'm afraid." Her expression grows thoughtful. "You're not afraid of the word. You're afraid of the change saying it will bring," she observes gently while reaching toward Diana's face. "Say the word, Diana. Say it, and know it is what you are." Diana hesitates, then whispers with growing confidence. "Amazon." Circe proceeds to reveal everything. The day Apollo arrived on their cursed shore, how he entrusted Diana to her care, how maternal love grew between them, and how divine decree silenced that sacred word. "They didn't want me to know I'm an Amazon. They took me from my people and tried to stop me from knowing what I was." "For what reason?" Diana asks, her voice heavy with emotion. Circe rises and wraps her arms around her adopted daughter. "The Amazons protected the world from darkness. Without them, the world may fall. Or perhaps you will say your name again and become what you were always meant to be." Diana's eyes glisten with newfound understanding. "Amazon," she declares with strengthened resolve.
Now.
Back on Gateway City's battlefield, Diana forces herself upright despite her injuries. Unwavering determination burns in her gaze as she faces the towering monster. "No," she states with quiet power. From her belt pouch, she retrieves a mystical lasso pulsing with crimson energy. The magical rope coils around her form like living lightning. The demon watches as she rises skyward, suspended by her enchanted weapon. "Away, warrior. You are beaten. Leave us as we prepare the way. This world is ours now," it declares with ancient malevolence. Diana shakes her head with fierce defiance. "No," she growls, her eyes reflecting the magical energies swirling around her hands. "For I am Diana of the Serra, last of the Amazons, daughter of Circe, princess of Hell, witch of the Wild Isle, and you will not have this world while I still draw breath." The colossal entity, known as the Harbinger, emerges from the ocean depths, water cascading from its massive frame as it advances toward Gateway City's shoreline. Diana strides up the beach to meet this threat, her magical lasso crackling with energy as it whips through the air around her body like a living serpent of power. The Harbinger's enormous eyes blaze with destructive force, launching concentrated beams of energy toward the Amazon warrior. Diana rolls beneath the deadly blast and responds with lightning speed, her enchanted rope striking across the monster's face with supernatural force. That is but a taste, Harbinger Prime. Retreat now and save yourself, she commands with unwavering authority. The creature refuses her mercy, bellowing a guttural summons to its minions. Dozens of small reptilian beings surge forward like a living tide, their claws and teeth gleaming as they overwhelm Diana's position. Retreat is doom, you fool, the Harbinger rumbles with ancient malice. Diana throws up a protective magical barrier, her lasso spinning in defensive patterns as she battles back the swarming creatures. Left with no alternative, she whirls her weapon overhead and launches it with perfect precision around the great beast's neck. Hear me, Harbinger Prime. This is a weapon forged in the fires of hell, fashioned by the sorceress Circe, and made from the remains of the last basilisk. It binds and burns in proportion to your sins, Diana declares as the mystical rope tightens. The monster's flesh begins to sizzle and smoke as otherworldly flames consume its skin. Release me, Amazon. Release me, the creature screams, its agonized cries shaking the buildings throughout the city. Diana nods with calculated mercy. You shall have your freedom on one condition only, Harbinger Prime. She commands the beast to return to the ocean depths and deliver a message to its master. Earth now stands under the protection of Diana of the Wild Isle, Princess of Hell and the last Amazon. The Harbinger stares at her for an eternal moment before finally lowering its massive head in submission. We accept, it rumbles in defeat. Diana releases the creature, watching as it retreats into the ocean with its minions following behind. As the waters return to peaceful calm, smoke from their battle drifts away on the ocean breeze, and a lone figure emerges through the haze, and the depths of memory. Diana recalls discovering an unconscious man washed upon the rocky shores of her cursed island home. She rushes to his side, kneeling beside his battered and broken body as waves lap at his feet. Please, tell them I'm sorry, the stranger gasps with his final breath before his eyes flutter closed. Who are you? Where did you come from? Diana whispers with growing concern. Without hesitation, she lifts the man in her arms and carries him swiftly back toward their cave dwelling. Susie spins in shock as the door bursts open and Diana rushes inside, the unconscious stranger cradled in her embrace. Mother, bring the Cerberus fur. It's the warmest. Diana shouts urgently as she places the man in her own bed. She quickly explains how she discovered him collapsed on their isolated beach. Even the powerful sorceress appears stunned by this unexpected arrival. I'll put the kettle on, Susie mutters while moving toward their humble kitchen. Hours later, the stranger awakens to find Diana seated patiently beside his bedside. She offers him a steaming cup of herbal tea while explaining the circumstances of his rescue. So, where are we? He finally asks after accepting her hospitality. Diana glances away with obvious discomfort. Well, this is going to be hard. You're in the underworld, she reveals gently. The man springs from the bed in panic. Wait. Hell? I'm dead? He shouts in disbelief. Both women exchange glances before shrugging simultaneously. Not exactly, they reply in unison. Steve slowly sits back down, muttering confused questions to himself. I'll just give you a minute with that, Diana offers softly, allowing him space to process this impossible reality. Later that evening, Steve joins them for dinner, apologizing for his earlier emotional outburst. Susie introduces herself with a firm handshake and her characteristic directness. Fortunately for you, you landed on the Wild Isle, which, thanks to Diana and myself, is the safest place to be if you have to be in hell, she explains matter-of-factly. Steve nods while his mind struggles to accept their words, then asks Diana to show him the location where she found him. As they walk together along the moonlit shoreline, Steve confesses his confusion about ending up in this realm. He had believed he lived a good life and never expected to find himself in hell upon death. Diana shrugs with philosophical acceptance. Here's what I think. Not everyone here belongs here. It's just sometimes where we've ended up. They stand in comfortable silence, gazing out at the endless dark waters until Steve speaks again. "Thank you for saving me. Twice," he says with genuine gratitude. Diana smiles warmly. "You're welcome." The present moment finds Diana and Steve standing face to face on Gateway City's battle-scarred shoreline. Recognition floods both their faces as Diana rushes forward and embraces her long-lost friend with overwhelming joy. "I hoped I would see you, but I never dreamed it would be today," she says while holding him tightly. Steve returns her smile with equal warmth. "What are you doing here?" he asks with obvious curiosity. "Saving the day," Diana replies as her skeletal Pegasus touches down nearby, its bone wings folding against its ethereal form. Steve's expression grows more serious. "The military command wants to speak with you, though you might not like their attitude." Diana's eyes flash with understanding. "You do not need to warn me, Stephen. I am not entirely naive in the world of men. I had a teacher with a sharp tongue in these things, as you well know." Her words carry the weight of hard-earned wisdom from her years with Cersei. Minutes later, Diana stands with dignified composure, while a considerably shorter general unleashes a furious tirade about the destruction she allegedly caused during her battle to protect Gateway City. His voice echoes through the command center as he lists grievances against her unconventional methods. When the military leader finally pauses for breath, Diana responds with measured calm. "I understand your position, Commander. I am an outsider, and you cannot control me. That frustrates you. But this is not my problem. My problem is the next monster that will arrive, and more lives will be lost if we do nothing. Still, I will coordinate with you to the best of my ability. This world is not prepared for what is coming. You will need my help." The general stares in stunned silence as Diana turns her attention to examining the city's tactical maps spread across nearby tables. "How is the evacuation proceeding?" she inquires of a nearby officer.
"Slow.
"We were going to stop since you killed the monster or sent it home," the man responds uncertainly. "I did," Diana confirms, "but that was just a harbinger, a messenger. The next creature could arrive within the hour. Evacuate at least a mile from the coastline." The general barks orders to his subordinates, but immediately returns to shouting at both Diana and Steve with renewed fury. Finally, Diana steps forward, her imposing presence towering over the much smaller man. "I think we both know you need me quite badly, given what just happened, but I don't need you at all. So perhaps rethink how you would like to approach this conversation, and we'll retry it when you've calmed down, hopefully before more innocent lives are lost." She pivots sharply toward the command center's exit. "I'll be outside, feeding my horse," she declares over her shoulder. Steve follows Diana outside, finding her channeling magical energy into her skeletal Pegasus. He approaches carefully and extends his hand to pat the undead steed, which responds by nuzzling him with its bony muzzle in recognition. "Sorry about what happened in there," he offers apologetically. "It's disappointing, but I expected it," Diana replies with resignation. Before she can elaborate further about other heroes who might emerge to face the coming darkness, Pegasus suddenly rears back and releases a piercing whinny of alarm. A devastating wave of psychic energy washes over the entire city like an invisible tsunami. Soldiers throughout the area collapse to their knees, clutching their heads in agony as the supernatural force overwhelms their minds. Diana pushes forward through the mental storm, fighting her way toward the beach against the crushing psychic pressure. She stops abruptly, her face transforming into an expression of pure horror. Steve struggles to join her through the devastating energy wave, and together they look upward in absolute terror at the massive entity rising from the ocean depths. "Oh my God, Diana, what is it?" Steve asks, his voice barely audible above the creature's otherworldly presence. "Death personified," Diana whispers in response, her words carrying the weight of ancient knowledge and terrible understanding. She begins walking purposefully into the surf, her figure small against the towering nightmare emerging from the depths. "Completely evacuate the city. I'll buy you some time," but the tetracide leaves nothing behind. The monstrous being continues rising, its immense form blocking out the sun itself and casting the entire coastline into shadow. Diana does not stop moving forward, even as death itself looms above her. Miles away from the devastating shoreline battle, the staff of Gateway City Natural History Museum gathers around television screens, watching the supernatural conflict unfold through news footage. Among the crowd of concerned academics, one woman stares with particular intensity at the images flickering across the display. Barbara Minerva stands frozen, her coffee growing cold in her forgotten grip as recognition dawns across her features. The warrior woman battling impossible monsters on the screen matches something from her extensive research, something she has studied for years. Wonder Woman, Barbara whispers under her breath before spinning away from the television. She pushes past her startled colleagues in a frantic rush, abandoning everything as she races toward the exit with newfound purpose burning in her eyes. At the military command center near the boardwalk, Diana returns from her supernatural battle as the colossal tetracide continues its methodical advance toward Gateway City's coastline. She strides into the tactical center and leans over the situation table with grim determination etched across her face. I used magic to slow it down and buy us some time, but the tetracide is very resistant to magic. My mother would have been more effective, but alas, we only have me, Diana explains to the assembled officers. She turns to address the gathering of soldiers, her expression growing darker. Before you leave, and you should all leave immediately, it's important that I tell you how the tetracide kills, so that you may have a hope of fighting it after it has killed me. The military personnel move closer, fear evident in their widening eyes as Diana shares her terrible knowledge. She explains that tetracide literally translates to four-killer, describing how the massive creature destroys life through four distinct methods: death of fear, death of mind, death of body, and death of soul. Death of fear doesn't sound so bad. One soldier interjects with nervous hope, but Diana shakes her head with sorrowful understanding. She reveals the horrifying truth. The monster will emit a supernatural sound that strips away all capacity for fear from those who hear it. Without fear to protect them, victims become irresistibly drawn to the tetracide, rushing toward the creature and walking directly into its waiting maw where they suffer the remaining 3 deaths in sequence. I don't want to be dramatic, but the people who are crushed to death in the race to the tetracide's maw will be the lucky ones, Diana states while scanning the faces of those gathered around her. So please, for the love of Hera, leave this place. Run if you can. After a moment of heavy silence, she nods with finality and strides toward the exit. Steve follows quickly, but Diana implores him to focus on evacuating as many civilians as possible. I cannot help them once the sound begins, and it will begin very soon, she calls over her shoulder as she heads toward the beach. Pegasus waits faithfully on the shoreline as Diana approaches, the monstrous tetracide looming larger in the distance. She sighs deeply and places her hand against the skeletal horse's bony frame with gentle affection. Pegasus, keep your distance. Attack with hellfire if you can, but stay out of reach. If it lays one tentacle on you, that's it, and I'm quite sure Zeus will make certain that you're not resurrected again, my friend, she whispers while resting her forehead against his ethereal muzzle. The undead steed leaps skyward with powerful hoofbeats, carrying Diana into aerial combat position as she readies both sword and lasso. Tetracide, I wish you no ill will. I only seek to protect these people, this city, this world. I will give you the same offer I gave the Prime Harbinger. Leave now and never return, or die by my hand, Diana calls out as she hovers before the approaching nightmare. The creature's response thunders across the entire city in a deafening roar of defiance. Diana nods with steely resolve shining in her eyes. So be it, she says quietly. With lightning speed, Diana hurls her massive sword like a spear, embedding the blade deep into the tetracide's head with her lasso wrapped around its hilt. She races through the air around the monster, using her supernatural flight to bind the creature with her mystical rope. Goddess Nike, lend me your winged speed, if not victory, she prays desperately. Pegasus swoops in to support her assault, breathing hellfire across the monster's hide, but their strategy crumbles when a massive tentacle reaches up and tears the sword free, sending the lasso falling uselessly into the waves. Diana refuses to retreat, reaching into her magical pouch while whispering an ancient incantation. She draws forth a gleaming battle axe, its blade humming with supernatural power. "Strike true, my friend," she calls to the weapon as she dives between the creature's writhing tentacles, slashing and severing the appendages with precise strikes. But one slippery limb wraps around her arm with crushing force, trapping her completely. "No!" Diana screams as the tentacle tightens its grip. In the depths of memory, Diana recalls her life on the Wild Isle when Steve had grown accustomed to their supernatural existence, helping her battle the kraken that seemed particularly fond of attacking him. Despite adapting to Hell's dangers, he still yearned for his home world. "Do you miss it terribly? Tell me about your home." Diana had requested one evening as they sat before their crackling fire. Steve's eyes grew distant with longing as he described Gateway City's coastal beauty, how the sun would dance across the ocean waters like scattered diamonds. That night, while Sussy prepared their humble dinner, Diana studied her mystical texts with growing excitement. Eventually, she closed her book and approached her mother. "Steve, would you mind grabbing some firewood from the pile by the door?" Diana called, waiting until they were alone before whispering her discovery to Cersei. "I found it, Mother. The way to send Steve home. This spell," she revealed, showing the ancient text. But Sussy warned that such magic required a worthy sacrifice, not something small or insignificant. "I understand it perfectly," Diana replied with quiet determination. That night, Sussy awakened to find her daughter sitting before the fire, whispering incantations in the darkness. "Diana, what are you doing up at this hour?" she asked softly. Diana looked up with resolve burning in her eyes. "I couldn't stop thinking about what I am. If I am a great warrior, and will someday be an even greater one, a savior of humanity, as you say, then I cannot fail in my first mission for humanity." She gestured towards sleeping Steve. "One good man is all it takes to save the world. He wasn't a gift, Mother. He was a test." Sussy reached for her daughter in concern, but Diana pulled aside her cloak, revealing her severed arm lying before the flames. "If we are right, that I am a great warrior, then the dominant arm of a great warrior is a worthy sacrifice," she explained as Sussy gasped and knelt beside her. The next morning brought the casting of their spell, Steve's shocked departure back to his own world, and Diana's quiet acceptance of her permanent loss. In the present moment, the tentacle tightens around Diana's arm, but she whispers a spell, and the limb suddenly vanishes with crackling magical energy. She falls briefly before regaining flight, returning to the command center where concerned officers rush to her aid. "Are you okay?" "Your arm. It took your arm," one soldier exclaims, but Diana shakes her head in frustration that they haven't evacuated yet. "I'm fine. I lost my arm long ago. In its place is a magic arm my mother and I made. I can get it back, but it will take complicated magic," she explains while attaching a prosthetic replacement. Steve approaches with understanding dawning in his expression. "This is how you got me out. You gave them a hero's arm," he says softly. Diana smiles and touches his cheek gently. "I believe I called it a warrior's arm, but it was more than worth it." When Steve expresses reluctance to abandon her to face this monster alone, Diana responds with loving firmness. "I know. It's the reason you were worth saving. But you need to listen to me and go." Diana heads back outside, hoping to buy more time for the ongoing evacuation, but stumbles directly into Dr. Barbara Minerva waiting near the exit. "Miss, you shouldn't be here," Diana warns the excited woman. Barbara stares at her with obvious awe as Diana begins to turn away. "Wonder Woman," Barbara suddenly shouts, causing Diana to spin back in surprise. "The Amazon. It's what they would call their champion. You are one, right?" "An Amazon," Barbara says, her words tumbling out in breathless excitement. Diana regards her with newfound interest. "You know about the Amazons?" she asks with careful curiosity. Barbara nods enthusiastically, explaining her lifelong study of Amazon mythology and her doctoral dissertation on their culture and legends. But their conversation is interrupted by the piercing screech of the tetracide echoing through the city streets. I must go. We will speak on this more, Diana promises before leaping into the air and flying toward her destiny. She lands once again on the shoreline, staring at the approaching monster as it draws ever closer to Gateway City's vulnerable population. For the first time since this nightmare began, Diana formulates a plan that might actually save Gateway City's citizens. She gathers a news reporter and his cameraman, bringing them to the highest building in the city, where she can work her most powerful magic. As she begins tracing an intricate mystical sigil on the rooftop, she looks up at the bewildered media personnel. This is not for recording, gentlemen, Diana explains with solemn authority. Magic is very powerful and sacred, and someone must earn the responsibility to wield it. She continues her spellcasting preparations before finally signaling them to begin their broadcast. Once the camera begins rolling, Diana addresses the people of Gateway City directly, warning them of the approaching horror while asking them to remain calm. My name is Diana, and I'm afraid that I need your help to save your city. This will be difficult to hear, to understand, but to save you from the fate of the tetracide, I'm going to briefly make the entire city deaf, she reveals to her television audience. She acknowledges their fear while emphasizing the need for mutual cooperation and assistance during her battle against this ancient evil. I came here to save your city, but today will be up to each of you to save your city instead. I know you can do it. Wonder Woman believes in you, she declares to all of Gateway City. Diana reaches into her magical pouch and retrieves a mystical vial, smashing it in the center of her completed sigil. Powerful magic explodes outward in brilliant waves, and green mist begins blanketing the entire city as Diana's desperate plan takes effect, silencing the world to protect it from the tetracide's deadly call. Inside their mystical shop, sisters Ida and Gia Candy watch the supernatural crisis unfold through television news coverage. They observe as Diana addresses Gateway City through the broadcast, requesting that citizens assist their neighbors while her deafening spell blankets the entire metropolis. Ida holds up a handwritten sign for her sister, explaining her intention to venture outside and provide aid to those in need. She reaches toward their shop's entrance and pulls the door open, but both women freeze in astonishment to discover Diana and Steve Trevor standing on their threshold. Hey, Ida, can we come in? Steve asks with familiar warmth. Gia suddenly erupts into panic, her voice rising with terror. Oh God, I can hear you. Am I going to hear the death sound? She shouts while quickly covering her ears with trembling hands. Diana smiles reassuringly and gestures for calm. You're okay. I've done a protective spell around this building so that we can communicate safely. Steve introduces Diana to the pair, explaining how she and her mother protected him during his time on the Wild Isle in Hell. Both Ida and Gia stare at the Amazon warrior with obvious shock and amazement. This is a lot to process, but I'm guessing there's no time for that. For what reason are you here? Ida asks with practical urgency. Steve nods and smiles, revealing that Diana requires the assistance of witches for her desperate mission. Diana steps forward and places a comforting arm around Gia while gesturing toward the magical supplies throughout their establishment. Fear not, Gia. I come seeking only ingredients, no more. I had to use the last of some things for the spell to deafen the city, she explains with gentle authority. She flexes her prosthetic replacement limb, describing how her original magical arm was forged in divine fire by Hephaestus himself and served as a powerful weapon. However, she will need her mystical second arm restored to defeat the approaching tetracide. Gia nods at the warrior with growing understanding. Arms are good to have, she says softly. Diana begins listing the rare ingredients required for her restoration spell, and Gia moves swiftly around their shop, gathering the most precious items from a secured safe. Diana smiles with genuine gratitude. Gia, thank you. You are quite the witch, she says as the final components are laid across their counter. Diana glances around the room with practical concern. Do you have somewhere else where I can cast the spell? There will be quite a lot of blood. In the distant past on the wild Isle of Hell, Sussy rushes outside from her cave dwelling, falling to her knees as she struggles to catch her breath. The visions have overwhelmed her mortal mind with their intensity and terrible clarity. So the visions have started then. She gasps into the twilight air. A divine voice calls to her from the heavens above. Sussy looks upward, but keeps her eyes tightly shut against the otherworldly radiance. "You did this," she demands with accusatory pain. A long pause fills the air before the voice finally responds with loving authority. "Yes, my most devoted disciple." Sussy questions the divine plan with anguished confusion. For what reason would the goddess do this to her most faithful servant? For what reason would she allow her devoted disciple to be imprisoned on this cursed island and burden her with raising a child that isn't her own? There is a great and powerful game afoot, Circe. A new path has been set, the voice explains with cosmic wisdom. The goddess reveals her foresight. She knew that Sussy would love and care for the child, and that Diana's love would, in turn, transform Circe herself. "I could see that only one such as you could raise the hero that we would need. I see that you will, in time, defy even me to protect her," the divine voice declares with prophetic certainty. Suddenly, brilliant light fills the entire sky, illumination so intense that Sussy can perceive it even through her tightly closed eyelids. "You may look upon me, Circe, most beloved of all my beloved. Look upon Hecate, and know you are blessed and will be remembered," the goddess commands with eternal love. Sussy opens her eyes and gazes upon the goddess of magic and witchcraft in all her terrible glory. Shortly afterward, she returns to their cave, where Diana sleeps peacefully in her humble bed. Sussy studies her adopted daughter, remembering the visions of the future she witnessed in her dreams, glimpses of the hero Diana will become, and the sacrifices yet to come. Diana suddenly opens her eyes and reaches for her mother figure. "I had a bad dream," she whispers with childlike vulnerability. Sussy lies beside her, admitting that she too experienced troubling dreams. Diana yawns and pulls closer to her mother's warmth, asking about the nature of Circe's nightmare. The witch stares up at the rocky ceiling of their dwelling for a long moment before responding. "The future," she whispers softly into the darkness. In the back room of the Candy Sisters shop, Diana's upper body becomes covered in blood voluntarily donated by Steve, Gia, and Ida. The three companions watch with wide eyes as Diana begins muttering her ancient incantations within a carefully drawn circle of power. Blood-red light fills the chamber, and mystical energy suddenly slams into Diana's chest with tremendous force. The darkness of the stockroom door opens, revealing Diana stepping forth with her magical arm fully restored and glowing with supernatural energy. "Thank you, my friends. My strength has fully returned. I owe you a debt, and it will not be forgotten," Diana declares as she moves to cleanse the dried blood from her body. She approaches the exit, preparing to return to her battle against a tetracide, but stops abruptly upon seeing smoke and fire marking the creature's destructive path into the city. "By Hecate, no," Diana whispers with growing horror. She leaps into the air, flying swiftly back toward Gateway City's heart. Hovering close to the massive monster, she desperately searches for some method to halt its relentless advance. The people of Gateway City cannot hear the death sound due to her deafening spell, so they remain safe from its psychological lure. Instead, the frustrated creature has descended lower, actively hunting for victims. Every step shakes the earth itself, and buildings quake and crumble at its passing. Suddenly, inspiration strikes Diana's tactical mind, and she flies back toward the ocean beyond the city limits. She hovers over the location where her sword disappeared beneath the waves during their previous encounter. Beginning another complex spell, she causes the ocean waters to bubble and churn violently. Finally, her blade breaks free from the depths and returns to her waiting hands. "Hello, my friend. I've had a very big idea for you. You're going to love it," Diana says with determined satisfaction. She reaches into her magical pouch and retrieves a mystical potion bottle. Another quick incantation causes the red liquid inside to bubble and foam. Diana hurls the potion onto the beach, and the air suddenly fills with the screeches and cries of simulated humanity. Manufactured horror and fear echo throughout the shoreline. Inside Gateway City, the Tetracide suddenly pivots toward this new sound. The massive creature begins moving back toward the beach, drawn irresistibly to the sounds of anguish it craves above all else. Waiting at the pier, Diana begins casting another powerful spell, this time focusing her magic directly on her recovered sword. The blade begins glowing with brilliant green energy, and as her incantation concludes, the weapon grows to enormous size. Yet Diana still wields it as effortlessly as if it were light as a feather. She leaps skyward, now holding a sword so massive it could stand against the likes of the Tetracide itself. The monster remains focused on the artificial cries of anguish, apparently unaware of the trap being set above its towering form. Diana hovers directly over the great creature, positioning herself for the decisive strike that will end this nightmare. Finally, she shouts a command to Pegasus, who responds by blasting the Tetracide with concentrated hellfire. The monster looks upward and opens its cavernous mouth in a thunderous roar of rage. Diana responds with her own battle cry and dives with supernatural speed. Her massive sword points directly at the creature's open maw, and a sickening sound echoes across the battlefield as the enchanted metal pierces the great beast, cutting it completely in two. The monster trembles for a brief moment before falling to one side, finally defeated by the last Amazon's courage and cunning. Victorious, Diana walks away from the battlefield as news cameras capture her triumph for the entire world to witness. The footage travels instantly across the globe, reaching the highest levels of government and military command. In the Oval Office, the president watches these extraordinary events unfold on his private monitors with growing concern. He turns toward a nearby blonde woman whose expression mirrors his own apprehension. "Kale, you're the National Security Advisor. Advise already," he demands with obvious frustration and uncertainty. The woman faces him with grim assessment. "Mr. President, even if she killed that thing, I'd say we still have a very big problem on our hands." Her words carry the weight of someone who understands that Diana's supernatural abilities and independence represent challenges far beyond any conventional military or political solution. The era of Wonder Woman has begun, and the world's power structures are about to face questions they never anticipated having to answer. Diana stands triumphant on Gateway City's shoreline, glaring upward at the bisected Tetracide as its massive form slides apart, cleaved perfectly in two by her enchanted greatsword. Yet despite this apparent victory, Diana understands a terrible truth. The monstrous entity remains severely wounded, but not truly dead. Her mystical blade tumbles through the air, shrinking to normal size as she catches it with practiced ease. The thunderous roar of approaching fighter jets fills the sky above. Diana looks upward as United States military aircraft streak overhead, launching a coordinated missile strike against the fallen Tetracide. The powerful weapons streak through the air with deadly precision, but the wounded creature releases a bellowing roar and swats the three incoming missiles away like bothersome insects. Diana watches in absolute horror as the deflected weapons reverse course, now heading directly toward Gateway City's populated areas. "No," she whispers with growing dread. Without hesitation, she leaps into the air and gives chase, speaking words of ancient magic while casting protective spells to intercept the wayward weapons. "Hecate, please aid your servant in her hour of need," Diana prays desperately as she hurls mystical energy toward the missiles. Two of the deadly projectiles are caught by her magic and redirected away from the city, but the third continues its relentless approach toward a crowded building. Just as impact seems inevitable, Pegasus appears with perfect timing, opening his skeletal jaws and breathing concentrated hellfire that destroys the weapon completely. "Thank you, Pegasus," Diana whispers with relief. She glances upward to observe the fighter planes banking for another attack run. "Can't be having any more of that," she mutters with determination. Moments later, a military pilot glances up from his instrument panel, his eyes widening in disbelief as the female warrior appears flying alongside his aircraft.
"Hi.
So, I need you to not do that again, all right? Diana requests with polite but unmistakable authority. The stunned pilot stares speechlessly before finally nodding. Yes, ma'am. Diana nods in acknowledgement and flies away to address the true threat below. Soon Diana hovers over the mighty tetracide, observing with growing concern as the creature slowly heals itself, pulling and knitting its bisected body back together with supernatural regeneration. She stares at this impossible sight, realizing that she has only been buying precious time rather than achieving true victory. Now, she must find a way to end this fight permanently. She reaches down to her belt and begins unraveling her glowing lasso, her mind filling with powerful memories from her time on the wild island hell. In those distant days, Sussy had presented her daughter with this mystical weapon as they sat together around their humble fire. It's a last resort, Diana, but you will need that more than once where you're headed, her mother had warned with prophetic wisdom. Diana had smiled sadly and sighed with youthful hope. Would it trouble us so to talk about some of my future in a positive light, mother? Cersei looked up and nodded with maternal understanding. Diana, I'm very sorry if I've given you the impression your future is negative, because it's not. It's glorious, filled with beauty and horror, danger and opportunity, which is the reason you will need this. She wrapped the lasso around Diana's hand with careful reverence, explaining that it would hold anything and possess the power to transform anything it touched. I have named her Thea. It means sacrifice, Cersei revealed. Diana had stared down at the glowing weapon in her hands and nodded with acceptance. Her quest began that night, and she left Cersei by their fire to test the lasso's power. Hours later, Diana returned with her body cut and torn, blood seeping from several small wounds sustained in battle. You didn't have to wait up, she gasped as she collapsed beside the flames. Speak plainly, Diana, Cersei whispered with concern. Diana looked up, memories of her brutal encounter with a harpy filling her mind. They had fought deep into a cave where Diana lost her battle axe, leaving her no choice but to use the lasso to strangle the monster while watching the light fade from its eyes. I found it a bit cruel, she finally whispered with troubled conscience. Sussy stared at her, anger flashing in her eyes as she stood abruptly. Diana, not everything you meet will decide to be your best friend. Many will try to kill you before even pushing away your hand of friendship. Thea is made exactly for that, she declared before turning away toward their cave dwelling. Diana sighed as she watched her mother depart, tending their fire while slowly extinguishing the flames. She either cannot see the cruelty in it, or she does not care, she whispered into the growing darkness. But suddenly, there was divine light within the dissipating smoke. Diana looked up as her patron goddess, Hecate, materialized before her with otherworldly radiance. You're right, Hecate acknowledged with divine understanding. The goddess leaned down to her chosen warrior, explaining that Cersei had indeed created a cruel weapon for her daughter, but would only do so because she knew Diana would need such power. Diana bowed her head respectfully. This weapon, perhaps we do not see things the same way. Hecate shook her head with gentle correction. This lasso is your mother, girl. She made it with love and pain, fire and blood. It's a lasso of transmogrification because transformation is what she knows best. And for you, she demands only the best, the goddess whispered before disappearing into the fading smoke. In the present moment, Diana floats above the healing tetracide, studying the monster as it continues its supernatural regeneration. She lowers herself to the beach and gazes down at the lasso in her hands, Thea, created by her mother's sacrifice and wisdom, as a desperate plan begins forming in her mind. Of course, it was in front of me all the time. I am become her, she who is both terrible and tragic, cursing and cursed, forever entwined in injustice. A living hell, this mantle must I accept today, for a far greater good, in hope and faith that I will once again someday become Diana of the Wild Isle, Diana, last of the Amazons, Diana, daughter of Cersei. Mother, please do not forget me for now, she whispers as she begins wrapping the mystical lasso around her arm, remembering Ceci's teachings about transformation and sacrifice. Diana's body begins changing dramatically, growing in size as her skin becomes thick and scaly. Her human form stretches and morphs into something ancient and terrible. "Now I am doom. I am Medusa, and none that see my face shall live," she roars, rising as a half-snake creature with serpentine hair twisting and hissing around her transformed head. Back at the Candy Sisters' magic shop, Steve, Dr. Minerva, and the Witch Sisters watch this horrifying transformation unfold through news footage on their screens. "What happened to her?" Steve whispers in absolute horror. "She's Medusa," Dr. Minerva explains with academic knowledge, sharing the mythological story of the cursed Gorgon with a stunned group. On Gateway City's beach, the transformed Medusa slides forward with serpentine grace, hissing as the regenerating tetracide roars its challenge. The two monsters lock gazes, Medusa's terrible eyes meeting the creature's many smaller orbs. Those alien eyes regard the Gorgon, and the ancient curse takes immediate effect. The tetracide stops moving entirely, its massive body transforming into solid stone, frozen forever in its moment of healing. But Medusa's transformation remains incomplete. She turns back toward the city, sliding forward on her serpentine lower body, searching for additional prey with predatory hunger. It's dead. For what reason is she still Medusa? Minerva asks while monitoring her laptop feed. Maybe it's not that simple, Ida observes thoughtfully. If you become something else, how do you remember what you were? Steve considers this wisdom for a moment, then nods with growing understanding. He tears the sleeve from his shirt, fashioning a makeshift blindfold. "Your friends remind you," he declares, heading toward the door despite the sisters' attempts to stop him. Medusa moves through Gateway City's streets, her massive tail lashing out and demolishing buildings as she slides forward in her transformed state. A familiar voice calls to her through the destruction and chaos. "Diana," Steve says, moving forward with his eyes covered by the improvised blindfold. "Diana, I know you can hear me, and I know you understand that this is not who you are. You must remember, you are Diana, Witch of the Wild Isle, daughter of Circe, the last of the Amazons, Wonder Woman, hero of Gateway City." The Gorgon Medusa holds her clawed hands to her ears as the scales begin falling away from her transforming body. Her serpentine form shrinks steadily, and once again Diana stands before her faithful friend in her true human form. One good man can save the world. "Steve, thank you," Diana whispers with profound gratitude and relief. But their victory remains incomplete. After thanking Steve once more for his courage and friendship, Diana flies back to the shoreline and approaches the petrified tetracide. She draws back her fist and strikes the stone creature with tremendous force, cracking the mineral surface and shattering it completely, ensuring that the ancient beast is destroyed beyond any possibility of regeneration. Diana returns to the beach to find her new companions waiting for her with expressions of concern and curiosity. Steve, Dr. Minerva, and the Candy Sisters gather around their heroic friend. "What now?" they all ask simultaneously, eager to understand what comes next in this supernatural adventure. Diana smiles with renewed purpose and determination. "Oh, there's so much to be done. I'm not going anywhere," she begins with enthusiasm. But suddenly, without warning, a massive hole opens in the sand directly behind their group. An enormous glowing hand reaches upward from the mysterious opening, grasping Diana with supernatural strength and pulling her down into the unknown depths below. The unexpected abduction happens so quickly that her friends can only stare in stunned silence at the spot where she vanished. "What the?" Ida finally shouts after a long pause, breaking the shocked silence that has fallen over the group. Diana has disappeared into whatever realm lies beneath Gateway City's beach, leaving her newfound allies to wonder what new supernatural threat has emerged to challenge the last Amazon. The mystery deepens as they realize that Diana's adventures in the mortal world have only just begun, and darker forces than the tetracide may be stirring in the shadows, waiting for their opportunity to strike. This is Geek Force. See you in the next one.